Hello and welcome back to Essential Excel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you're new to the channel, why not after this video check out some of our previous content. There's all great tips and tricks to help you get started and really master Excel. In today's video, we're going to look at the index match combination of formulas and to see really actually are they better than using the VLOOKUP. You're going to make sure you want to stay until the end of this video to get to that conclusion, but first of all we're going to be jumping into each of the functions to talk through them and look at the points or parts that make them up so we have a better understanding. So the first one we have is the index formula function. So it's made up of 4 different parts. The first is the array. So this is a range of cells or array constant. The second is row number. So this is the row position in the reference or array. Number 3 is the col number or column number. So this is an optional. You don't actually need to put this. The first 2 are mandatory, but the 3rd and 4th are optional. So the third is the column position in the reference or array. And lastly, we have the area number. So this is again optional, and this is the range in the reference that should be used. And again, at the end there, you've got the formula in its entirety, so you can see how it all comes together. So basically, the main focus parts of this are the fact that the first part is array or range in which you want to look through. The second part is the row from the row or position within that range that you want to extract. And then we have the third part where we can say what column in that range do we want to pull. Area number, we're not going to look too much at this. This is kind of moving on and looking at index in more detail. Area number is predominantly if you have more than one range in part number 1, this would define what of those ranges or areas you wish to utilize. We won't be looking at part 4 much in this video. We'll briefly touch on it. But again, let us know in the comments if you want us to do a more dedicated video to the index function, and we'll definitely go through that and address all those points and any questions you might have. Okay, the match function. So the purpose of the match function, and as just now seen this, I think I forgot to talk about the purpose of using the index, but if you just go back, it was on the slide, so you can definitely check it out there. So the purpose of the match function is to get the position of an item within an array. So it's made up of 3 parts. The first is lookup value, the value to match in the lookup array. The second is lookup array, so a range of cells or array reference. And the third is the match type. So this is how to match, and it's specified as either -1, 0, or 1. So these are 3 different types, and it's in a similar vein to when we looked at the VLOOKUP, where you can have an exact match or an approximate match. So it's basically, in short, we're going to be using 0, and that's the option that you should be using going forwards, because it gives us an exact match, and it's just a lot better way to get started, in short, really. So for reference though, the match type of 1, this basically means that the match finds the largest value that is less than or equal to the VLOOKUP value, or the lookup value, not VLOOKUP value, sorry. Again, 0, match finds the first value exactly equal to the lookup value. And lastly, we've got -1 option, where match will find the smallest value that is greater than or equal to the lookup value. So there can be some useful uses for those, but again, just to get started, we'll be using the value of 0, and that's what we recommend you using going forwards, especially when you first start using the match formula. And then we've got the match formula in its entirety at the bottom there, so you can see the 3 parts pulled together. So the main purpose of match, again, is we have the first part, which is we give a value that we want to look for. The second is the range in which we want to look for it, and 3 being the type we want to match on. So as we just touched on, we're going to be using the exact match. Cool, so we'll jump into Excel. I hope this is making sense so far. The reason we do these slides is just so you have them to reference back if you want to look at them or go through them at a slower pace. But we'll be now jumping into Excel to go through the examples and pull this together. Okay, so we're now in Excel, and we're going to work through our examples we have here. We'll step through the 2 functions separately, so looking at index first, followed by match to help explain them, and then we'll bring them both together into the index and match formula. So in order for our example, we've got a data set over here in columns A to D. Firstly, we've got the list of names in column A, followed by some sales figures, we'll call them, in columns B through to D. And what we're going to do is obviously use our index match to be able to pull through the desired data. So with index, what we're going to do is jump straight in and enter our formula. So we'll do a equals index and open brackets. And you can see in our prompt that pops up having entered the function name, we have two options here. Well, not two options, but it gives us detail for two variations of the formula. So the second part, what has index followed by reference, we touched on, obviously it's the same variables with the addition of that area number at the end there. And this second option here is if we have multiple references in our first part of the formula, the area number allows us to define which reference we obviously want to utilize or look in. We're not going to touch on that in this video. We might put together a separate video on index to then go in a bit more detail of all the abilities and what you can do with the formula. But for now, we're just going to use that top one you see there using just the array, the row number, and also column number. So in our index formula, what we're going to do is first we need to enter the array or the range in which contains data. So the very basic version of this, what we can do is simply select, and this is on an example where we only want to look at values in column B for January and pull through a particular part or point in that array. So all we need to do is if we select from row 2 to row 7, that is our array and range we want to look at, followed by a comma, and we can simply just now enter here the row number in which we want to look at. So all we need to do there is say we knew that the value we wanted to pull was the second in the second position of that range, then all we need to do is put the number 2, and obviously it's going to reference row 3 because row 3, or the first, is row 2 and the second is row 3 in our range. So if we just did comma 2 and then close brackets, you can see it's going to pull that corresponding value from that range. So what it's doing is pulling this value here. And that's if, alternatively, there's sort of, obviously when dealing with ranges you obviously need to be careful because we've put a specific range here, that's obviously the second position. If we had selected the column B as a whole, then obviously it wouldn't be in the second position, it would be now in the third because the first is now starting in row 1. But we're trying to avoid that to sort of not overcomplicate this. So yeah, simply there we go, we've got our range and the position in which we want to get our value from. Taking this one step further, what we are able to do is we can actually say, okay, what we want to do is actually our data is going from B to D. So what we want to do is actually don't want to just look in column B, we want to also look in column or up into column D. So we're now looking at the range B2 to D7, as you can see highlighted on the left, here. So we've already entered in the row in which we wish to pull a value, but let's say we now want to pull it from column C rather than column B. So column B, so we need to enter another part to the formula, which is column number. So let's just go back through this. So we've got our array, what spans 3 columns. We've got our row number, in which that's the row what contains the value to pull. Because we now have multiple columns or extensive range in here, we now need to enter the column number from which to pull. So if we wanted to pull that same value from column B, we'd enter the number 1 because it's the first column in our range. But if we wanted to pull the second, say maybe this value from C, so the 7793, all we need to do here is change our 1 to the value of 2, and you can see it's now pulled that value instead. So that's the extent of the index formula we'll be looking at in this example today, and obviously this is how it works. So you can see, and this is where we now move on to match, why we then use the match formula, because this formula works great if we know where this position is, or this number 2, and to enter it manually ourselves. But this is where we're going to bring in match that will actually generate this position for us, so we don't have to do it. So to look at match now, so we're going to do our equal sign and enter the word match, obviously. And as you can see, we've then got our value available to us there. So what we have to do now is obviously work on an example over here. And what we'll do in our bigger example is we'll be looking for a person's name to help define what values we want to return, or the range in which we want to return. So what we'll do is we will look up the name of John, and then let's take one in the middle. So let's say Tina. So what we want to do in our match formula is look up the value of, at sign, I want this one, quotations, Tina, followed by another quotations. So that's our lookup value. Lookup array, so where do we want to look for that value? So we want to look for it here in column A. So let's select there. And then our match type at the end here, so entering a comma obviously to get to the end. And we know we've got these different variations here. So we've got a less than option, we've got an exact match, or greater than. Again, without delving too much into this, we want to be using exact match, and this is always, and you might remember we touched on this with the VLOOKUP when we looked at that previously, that we want to use the exact match, especially when we're getting started, just to make sure we're finding our desired value. So then what we can do is complete our formula by doing our close brackets and then hit enter. Brilliant. So what we can now see is we've got a value of 3. And what that means is that Tina is appearing in the 3rd position in our range. And so John would be the 1st, Paul the 2nd, and Tina 3rd. So that's working perfectly. So that's all we need to do for match. So what we now want to do is utilize, or be able to bring into this, this position number that we've been able to find and combine it with obviously the index so that we can pull through a value from a different reference. Cool. And so what we can do is go into our index match function here. And what I'll do is just change this, and we'll put, let's put name here to make the formula dynamic. And just like that, and maybe let's just copy some formatting, why not? Cool. So the name we want to look for is Tina. Cool. So in our index match, what we need to do here now is combine the two. So to do that, we start off with index and just type that in. So index. So we now need to state the range that contains the values to potentially return. So we'll again start with a very simple version, and as we did with index, and we'll build on it in the demonstration. So let's just say that our only range that we wanted to pull through was going to be in column B. So it's just those January figures. So all we need to do is pull through that column as our array and do a comma. So the next part of our index is obviously to pull through the row number, or the position of the value that we want to return. So to do that, we now type in our match function and open brackets. So this match function is now nested within that index function. So with match, what we can do now, and let's make it dynamic by having our name value we've got here, is we'll select Tina, because that's the value we want to pull through. We'll then enter our we'll enter a comma to move to the next part of the formula, which is our lookup array. So as we know from just doing our match formula, names are in column A, so we just need to select this range here in column A, followed by a comma, and we want to get an exact match on the name Tina, so we get that position, and we finish our match formula by doing a close brackets. In this example, we're only going to do as far as the matching in the row, and we'll come to column number in a minute, but just to show you this very simple version. So obviously we don't need to enter column number, so we can finish also our index function by doing another bracket. So that is our full formula. So looking at the top here, we've got index, this range here, B2 to B7, and then what we want to do is we want to reference the position within this range that is derived from doing our match formula. And then when we hit enter, there we go. So we can see that our match formula is going to look for Tina, and Tina we know is in position 3 of our range, so we've got it here. And we're referencing, or we're looking at the array for index into column B, so what's here. So what our formula is incessantly doing is saying, look down this column for B, having that, or once you've done the match for Tina, and we can see that Tina and the January date meets here in this row 4 of our data set, what is the 88616, and that is the value obviously that we've returned here. So that is the basic index match formula. Why this is so powerful and potentially better than the VLOOKUP is because it's not a VLOOKUP, you're able to pull out any range you wish. So whereas with a VLOOKUP, you are limited that the value you look up has to be in the first column of your range. So in theory, you'd have to VLOOKUP pull and then be able to pull through one of the values to the right hand side of it. Whereas with index match, because you're not limited that, this index here, the B2 to B7, could be anywhere in your data set. It could be to the left or to the right of the search value you're looking for. So that's what makes it very powerful in being able to return values that you want and need without having to use a VLOOKUP that requires you to move information around to put it in the order that the VLOOK function requires. So let's just take this index match one step further by making it a two-dimensional lookup. And by that, what we need to do is simply, we've got our first match here, but then what the two-dimensional aspect allows us to do is to say, okay, well, we want to also be able to choose a different date. So what we'll do is we'll just give ourselves another data input here, and we'll call this date, or let's call it month. Actually, it's more in line with the wording we've got here. And let's just copy our little formatting down here, what we've got for name, just to keep everything nice and tidy. And let's say this time we want to pull a value from the February column. Cool. So what we need to do, the only updates we need to make is firstly our index range is first part here, so where we're going to look for a value or pull value from. So at the moment, if I just click on there, you'll see the two ranges that we have selected. So we just need to extend this now to be going over to column D so that we can pull through values that appear in one of these other columns. So that's perfect. So we now have our full range or array here. The second part for match, so this is working fine, don't need to make any changes to that, because what that is doing is giving us the row number in which we need to look at. So what we need to do is, between these two brackets at the end here, because that first closed bracket is obviously the end of our match formula, and then the second one is the end of our index. So we just need to jump in between the two of those and enter a comma. And you'll see, let me do that again. So you can see in our index range here we have, so at the moment we're in the position of row number, what is our match formula. So if we do another comma, we can then get into the column reference, what we have here. So this is now going to tell our formula which column we need to look at. So once again, we're going to use a match formula. So we type in here match, open our brackets. This time we want to look up the value of our month down here, so February. So we just select that, and then we do a comma. And then the lookup array, we want to match that or find that in obviously this first row here, just these first three columns of January, February and March. So we're going to look up the month name here, is what's in I11, in the range B1 to D1, and once again comma, and we want an exact match, so we're going to enter 0. And then we just need to enter a closed brackets to end that match formula. So what we can see we now have here is the full thing is our index formula, but it's obviously starting with the B2 to D7, which is the range in which our values are. The second part is a match formula. Let me just highlight that a bit better. Is a match formula to identify the row we want to pull from. And the second part is a match formula to identify the column that we wish to pull from. So upon hitting enter here, we can see that we're looking for Tina, what's in row 4 of our data, and February. So we should be pulling this value here of 9594 when we hit enter. So let's see what happens. And perfect, it's worked just as desired. So we've got the 9594 here. So this is now our two-dimensional lookup. So we can now just do either change the names here. So we could put, maybe this time we want Sam. So why is Sam giving us an error? Oh, it's because we've got same, so that doesn't work. So if we just take the E off of that, there you go. We can see we've now got Sam in February. So Sam in February was 6631. So yep, correct in the formula. And let's just change this last one. So let's say we want to look at Sam in March. So let's put MAR, M-A-R, for March. And we've got Sam, March 7751, and that's perfect. Yeah, we've got that value there as well. So there we are. In its entirety, we've got the full version there, the 2D lookup there. Or if we wanted to only look in the first range, we've obviously looked at how you can make it simpler as well. Ultimately, if you wanted to just use all this formula here, but you didn't want to look at that, you could just put, rather than doing a second match, you could just put a static value in here. So maybe say column 1 if you always wanted to look in January, and that's a lot better way to use it. So we can see this is the full range. We want to match on row, but we always want to be looking in column, the first column. Then obviously you can just put a static value in there rather than that second match formula. Cool, so I hope that was of great use to you. If you'd like to see some more examples of this, definitely just give us a comments below and we'll see what we can put together. As we say, this is a really powerful combination of functions, as it gives you a lot more options than the VLOOKUP does, predominantly being able to look at values or pull through a value that is to the left of our current name or lookup, and it doesn't obviously restrict you by the format, as we say with the VLOOKUP, where it has to be in a particular order. Again, give it a try, let us know what you think. We're always keen to hear what your thoughts are and how you got on with things. So again, you can do that by dropping us a comment below, or as always, reach out to us on Facebook. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and give this video a great big thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video coming up soon.